vacation.
It was a summer ago. My family and I had gone to a cabin that most would use for a winter vacation, but my family wasn't like that. The cabin was located in the middle of the forest. There was no cell phone service, so, as you can imagine, I was pissed. My mom always complained to me about being isolated and confined to the comforts of my phone. I always found solace in my phone, since being around people made me feel irrational and just plain weird. My parents never understood that. Anyway, my little sister is 6 years old and was playing around in the forest. She had gone a bit too far out of my sight, and I started to get a little worried. I called out her name but got no response. I then went in the direction that she did and found nothing but a bloodied bow. My eyes widened as I frantically ran around looking for her. I found a blood trail that led into the deeper parts of the forest. I hesitated, but nothing was going to stop me from saving my sister. I followed the trail for as far as it went. After about an hour, the blood stopped at a hole. I debated whether I should go back and tell my parents, but I didn't think they'd believe me, even if I did say that my sister was missing. There's no denying my parents thought I was insane. Despite my fear, I jumped into the hole. I fell for what felt like forever. Then, I finally hit water. My face morphed into disgust as I stumbled through what I thought was a sewer, since there was no light. I looked up out of the hole and saw a tiny white dot. I started to walk around. There was crunching under my feet. I paid no attention to it since I thought it was some dead leaves or sticks that had fallen into the sewer. That was until I fell. Some unknown liquid had splashed all over me. I remembered that my phone was in my back pocket, and I pulled it out and shined it on myself. Time seemed to slow down as I realized what I was walking in. It was a river of fresh blood. The blood had absolutely soaked me. I held in a scream as to not alert any nearby creatures. I then ran through the connection of tunnels and refused to stop until I started hearing footsteps behind me. I stopped, turned around, and shined my flashlight around. The light from my phone landed on a distant figure. It looked so small, so maybe it was a dog or an alligator that had sneaked in. I stupidly started to move towards it, and as I got closer, the figure started to get clearer. I started to see that it wasn't a dog or an alligator. As soon as I realized this, I stopped in my tracks and stared.
What is that?
It looked like me. Its body was contorted. Their back faced towards the ground, and its head was turned right side up and faced towards me. Its legs were normal, but its arms were legs as well. It had jagged teeth, and it was chewing on what was left of my sister's head. Then, I saw my parents' head beside it. I stepped back in shock and fear. The mutant of myself charged towards me. In a state of panic, I tried to run away, but I slipped. I hit my head on the rock and passed out.
Oh my gosh. Of course. That thing got your whole family? You're done. Don't tell me it was a dream. No! No! He killed his whole family, bro. That is crazy. Bro.
My parents were traveling for the weekend, as it was their anniversary, and to no surprise, they wanted to be alone. This meant that I had to take care and be in charge.
That's an interesting build. Unique body.
To my little brother, Oliver. Our home and neighborhood were surrounded by woods, and Ollie liked ambling around the trail that was behind our house, but he couldn't go back there.
Bro, that last one was crazy. Kills his whole family in his sleep. You know, people be doing that with sleepwalking. Isn't it sleepwalking? Not sleepwalking. People be sleepwalking. That junk is crazy, bro. I'm glad I ain't got nothing like that, and none of my family got nothing like that. Cause, bro, you would not be in the house with me if you had that. No.
Without permission. So naturally, since I was 18 and he was 10, I'd have to go with him for precautionary purposes. It was a little while before lunch, so I decided to join Ollie in his trek, so that way my appetite would be in a more salubrious state. It was spring, and the leaves were meager and just starting to grow back onto the trees, which also meant I had to watch out for any sort of dangerous animals that could possibly lurk out and cause harm to any of us. I could hear Ollie sniffing the air, and then him groaning at something. "Something smells like shit," he said nasally, as he pinched his nostrils shut. "Hey, watch your mouth," I retorted, surprised by the sudden curse. "Just because Mom and Dad aren't here doesn't mean you're allowed to say whatever." I did, however, sniff the air. He was right. There was a smell of rotten meat that permeated my nose. It was like roadkill. I saw what looked like legs by a tree about several yards from us. "Stay right there, okay?" I instructed Ollie. He nodded in agreement while keeping his hand on his nose. I leisurely walked forward and turned the tree to see what the thing was. It was a deer, and it was dead all right. Flies droned and swarmed around it. I was used to seeing dead animals around here. Hunting was pretty frequent. But there was something that rather took me aback. It was the fact that the way its neck had been ravaged into, it was almost entirely gone and torn down to the bone. A bear would go down to the muscle and stop there. But to the bone? This had to have been from something much more vicious. But what? I looked back to see if Ollie had actually done what I urged him to. He did, but he was peering out to the woods. His eyes, so fixated, were filled with concern and his face unnerved. "You okay, bud?" I asked, noticing his expression. "Something's out there," he murmured, as he continued to seem alarmed. I looked to see if he was kidding around. All that was in my view were the trees and brush. It might have been a deer or something. Don't worry so much. Come on, let's go back and get some lunch. And so we did, just to reassure him. I made ourselves some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches as we watched a movie for a bit. Ollie usually liked his sandwiches, and he'd been done with it in a few minutes, but he ate his so sluggishly. I didn't bother asking what he saw, because I figured that he must have scared himself and that he'd get over it in a while. However, the back of my mind was still unsettled by that deer. How could its neck have been mutilated like that to such a grisly state? Night dawned upon both of us, and Ollie was begging me to let him sleep beside me as I put him to bed. "What's gotten into you?" I asked him. "That thing's still out there. It was staring at me. It was dark and big, bigger than you. I'm sure you just scared yourself. If anything was out there, it wasn't anything dangerous." He continued to beg me, but I kept refusing, and told him to close his eyes and that he'd forget about it in the morning. I laid down in my bed, ready for a good rest. I like keeping my TV on just so I have a source of light in my room. I felt my eyes starting to sag and get heavy as I slowly felt myself growing drowsy. There was a sudden snap from outside. It sounded like a stick being splintered. I figured it was some animal, like another deer, but what would be out at this time of night? My TV was still on, so I decided to watch a little bit more, just so I could go back to sleep. Without even thinking, my gaze floated to the window, and my heart punched the inside of my chest. There was something at the window. I couldn't see what it was, save for the eyes. They were milky and opaque, almost lifeless, but they were staring right through me. I tried to make it seem like I didn't see the figure outside, and just roll over onto my stomach and pretend to be asleep to try and avert it. I then heard something against the glass. The thing was scratching my window. The sound was
Bro.
piercing my ears and grated at my nerves. My chest started to feel full as my breath started to shorten. My window was starting to open, and I could hear that thing
Look.
climbing into my room. Its presence was clearly made, as its shadow covered my entire bed in black.
Get
I
up.
sat
Do
there
something.
hyperventilating for what seemed like hours, until I felt the mattress start to sink in. The springs groaned as the thing had climbed onto the bed. I felt I could literally die from fright right there. The thing started to move across my bed. I was trying
Bro.
my best not to breathe so hard, but I was completely terror-stricken. It then stopped and stood right at my shoulders. I felt its giant feet clasping onto my shoulder blades. I could hardly breathe. I had a mirror to my right that allowed me to see what was above me, and chills ran down my spine. The creature was black, large, and at least 7 feet tall and lanky. Its arms went down to its calves. Its chest leaned over me and stretched to an impossible degree. It didn't even look human or animal. It seemed alien. I shut my eyes tight, hoping that it was just some dream. I could start to hear the creature's heavy breaths and growling. It sounded like a dog, but much more disturbing. As it grasped harder, I feared the worst. My ears were ringing. I wasn't breathing while I bit my tongue. My eyes were shut so tight, and the blood flow in my head stopped almost completely. Something then
Heck,
beckoned it off of me, and the creature leapt off. Through my ringing ears, I thought I could hear something like thumps and rusty hinges. I painfully felt the blood flow starting to come back, and I blacked out. Morning came, and I had a massive headache now, and my chest felt so tight. I needed to go wake up Ollie and make breakfast, and I reluctantly did so. I went into his room but found his bed empty. I checked all of downstairs to check if he was there somewhere. Nothing. I then thought of the one place he could definitely be if he was hiding. I went outside and took to the path in the back of the woods. I walked some ways while trying to get over the pain in my head when I saw his bare feet by the tree. "Ollie," I said, exhausted and annoyed in my grimace. "Come on, what are you—" I stopped. I felt my whole entire world collapse as I was bludgeoned with every single negative emotion possible. I put two and two together, and it answered my questions as it brought my distress up tenfold. Ollie was sitting there. His skin was pale. His cloudy eyes trickled with blood, and his neck was mangled to the bone. He was dead. He wasn't lying. That creature was still out there.
Came in your room. You knew what was out there. Tripping. The merch.
One night last summer, two of my friends, Sam and Jake, convinced me to sneak out with them and drink. We were all bored, just looking for something to do. We decided to go for a walk to a local gas station that was open 24 hours a day. The walk there was pretty uneventful. We talked about random topics and drank a couple of beers. Once we got to the gas station, Jake had to use the bathroom. When he was in the bathroom, there was a dirty, sketchy guy in there. Jake struck up a conversation with this guy. It was pretty normal, except when the guy asked why he was out so late and if he was by himself. Jake brushed it off as the guy was just trying to tell him to stay safe. We bought some snacks and we noticed the guy following us around while he was talking to someone on his phone. We left soon after, and on the
You see what it said on the news? 5 people missing.
Stay safe. We bought some snacks and we noticed the guy following us around while he was talking to someone on his phone. We left soon after, and on the way back, we sat on the side of the road and talked for a while as we drank some more. It was pitch black by now because there are no streetlights in the area. We saw a car coming down the road, which was no big deal. We sneak out pretty often, and we've never had any real problems. Cars usually just drive by. This time was different. The car spun around in the road and pulled up right next to us on the street, and two guys got out. We ditched the beers, got up, and sprinted down the street. Jake and I hid behind an RV, while Sam hopped a fence.
Calm.
The two men looked dirty, like they hadn't showered in days. We watched the two guys for a little while, which is when we noticed that one of them had a gun in his hand. They looked in our direction for a few minutes before they got back into their car and drove off. Jake and I looked for Sam, but we couldn't find him, so we decided to head back home. We thought we had lost them, but on the way back we turned a corner, and those same guys were sitting in the car, waiting there. We ran through the alleyways and backyards until we lost them. Every few minutes, we saw the car driving slowly down a street or alleyway in the distance, and we would hide. Eventually, we made it back, and Sam messaged to tell us that he got followed by a different car, but he made it home safe. It's been almost a year since that night. We're always more cautious when we go out, and Sam still has nightmares about being abducted. I don't know for sure if the guy from the bathroom had anything to do with it, but we believe that he's somehow connected to it.